Question of the day: what is your favorite war-based game? Now, war is an interesting topic, obviously, because it's bloody, it's ugly. War is a terrible thing, but it also always brings about changes, whether it be social changes or economic changes, political changes. War is always a catalyst of change. Think about World War II, for instance, the women entering the workplace and things like that. Just little tweaks and changes that we don't even think about that were direct causes of war, right? Not to mention that, the cartoons that you got out of World War II and stuff like that. But what is your favorite war game, and what is the reasoning behind it? Now, I'll tell you, some of mine are definitely the card-driven games by GMT, such as 1989 and the one that's alluding Twilight Struggle, because they really encompass an era of history and do it so well and do it justice. But today brings us to a topic of these wars between Athens and Greece in the 5th century BC. It's just phenomenal history to talk about these Greek city-states and how they were rivals and enemies for so long, and yet they formed together to fight the Persians later. So phenomenal history, historical era, Western civilization, how it all, brutally came to be, basically. So let's take a look today at Polis. This is a game it's a war game for 2 players, all about spreading your influence and gaining resources and somewhat having battles. The battles are slightly abstract, so it's more about growing your polis, your city-states, and growing them and getting the influence and prestige and having the most prestigious civilization between Athens and Sparta. So let's take a look at right now at how this pretty heavy game plays, and we'll come back up and talk final thoughts right now. So this is Polis laid out for a beginner game, for the start of the game. So Sparta has their areas, Athens has their areas. You put your merchants and your proxenos all over the table. Sparta starts with Messenia, Laodamon, and and Sparta. You also put galleys in the sea where they belong for the setup. The setup shown in the instruction booklet. Athens starts up here. You'll notice you have the symbols here matching kind of each of what they are. The Cyclades Sea there, and then Ionia, Chalkis, and Chios is where Athens starts. You also set up the markets on the outside here. These foreign markets, they start in the alpha round. They are not available to go to these second parts or whatever. There's a black cube. Those will become available later. Over here you have the tribute area for the board. And basically this is where you're going to receive tribute from these areas that you take control of to get resources later. You'll also start the game with a set of resources based on who you play as. Athens and Sparta are slightly different. The only difference really, I should say, is silver and wheat. Those are very necessary when it comes to feeding your people as well as growing your populations. You on your turn are going to do 2 actions, and then it will pass to the other person. You're going to keep going back and forth until both of you pass. Kind of like terraforming Mars, really, when it comes to doing multiple actions, two of them, and then pass at the end. But we're going to go through this list really quickly just to give you an idea of how to play this game. It is an area control game that will result in whoever has the most prestige at the end of the game winning, essentially, because it's going to be based on this prestige number. If at any point someone has 0 prestige during the end of round, you will lose it. You can see if you lose prestige at the end of the game, at the end of the round, if you have none, or if you can't pay any prestige, you will lose it. So the different actions are: you can create hoplites. Basically, this is going to work based on your cities that you own or the policies that you have access to. We don't have Syracuse right now, but Syracuse, but we're going to take it from here. So it'd be this population number. What you'll do is you'll take a cube off of here, much like you see these population cards have population on them already. Athens has got 5 up to its base population. You're going to take one of those off. You're going to spend it's a silver and a metal to create a hoplite, and you'll put that out onto that place. Now there are limits to how many you can have in each area. There's a stacking limit of 3 in the first round, 4, then 5 in the third round. To create galleys is the same thing, except you're going to do it in these seas where you have access based on the regions where they are. It's a silver and a wood, and then you take the population cube and make it a galley. Same thing with a merchant. It's a silver and a wood, but you put a merchant out there, and the merchants are these fellas here that can go and travel and go to different places to become to trade with these different foreign markets. This is essentially a way to get resources. Merchants, but they still have to travel in the similar rules to hoplites and galleys. You can develop a project those are these tiles here, and essentially these are things that are going to give you points at the end of the game. They're going to give you different amounts of prestige, but essentially what happens is it makes those policies more worthwhile, and as their price tag essentially goes up by having resources, not resources, but the prestige attached to them from those, they're going to become more desirable and more fightable as a sense. People are going to want them more. The next thing is you can move hoplites. You spend a prestige, and it's kind of like Game of Thrones. You pick an area that they're all going to move into, and you can cross as many places as you want. You can't cross seas and territories in the same motion. So let's say I picked Achaia. I could move all of these into Achaia for one prestige. However, you can't cross somewhere that the enemy controls. You can start or end a movement where the enemy controls, you just can't cross it. And the same thing works with galleys. You spend a prestige and the rules are the same. You can cross through as many as you want as long as you're not crossing through where someone controls. You can lay siege to a polis. So you have as many cubes in the territory as the population number. So let's say we're trying to take Argos here, Jason and the Argonauts, right? So you're going to take those cubes, have them in this area, and then you're going to lay siege. You would then roll the city dice. If it is the same number or higher than the population, you take control of that polis and you get it in your area, you put your cubes on it. If you fail, you'll put a siege marker on that polis to show that it's basically ensieged, and as you roll the dice the next time, you get a +1 to your dice roll, and that can happen as many times as you need. If someone else owns it, each time you attack and fail, they would still lose 1. Anytime you succeed, you would basically take over that city, and they would remove their cubes. You would add your cubes to it. You can collect tribute. Now this works basically on the cities that you have. You go over to their tribute markers. You take all the population you have in that polis. You go over here to these tribute areas, and you can see that they all produce different resources. So let's just say we were going to do Messenia. You would take your cubes and fill up as you needed them to those areas. So if you put cubes here, you'd basically say, okay, I want to get I've got 3 cubes to spend, but I really need wine. So I'm going to spend 2 of them there and 1 of them here, which means I'm going to collect 1 silver and 3 wine. Had I said, no, I really need all of that, I would get 6 wine by putting them there. Basically, you have as much tribute as you have workers there, resources there to use, which is a pretty cool system if you ask me, because it really shows the population of a city actually matters when it comes to production of a city. You can trade, which is where you move your merchant over to one of these trade areas. You pay the goods that it costs, and that's based on the market up there at the top. When you trade a good, you're giving it more supply, which means that the demand for it is lower, which means it will move the price cost to the right. However, if you were to trade silver instead, you can move it to the left, and makes it those goods are scarce. Therefore, people will pay. You will have to pay less for it to trade for them. You will get more for your trade. It's just supply and demand, basically. You can move your proxenos. This is a proxenos. It is basically a diplomat who can move into and out of other places, cities, and start civil wars. Those civil wars basically will take over someone's polis from the inside out instead of having to worry about moving hoplites in there. The problem is your proxenos can get captured. Then at the end of the game, at the end of the round, after everyone's passed, you'll check battles. If there are 8 or more units of yours or theirs in an area, obviously you couldn't have yours, it had to be theirs, you will then do a battle. You'll draw as many cards of these battle cards as you have wooden cubes in a fight. So let's just say I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's just split it in half for now. Let's say these are the Athens cards, these are the Sparta cards. The attacker will play 2 cards side by side. The defender will play 2 cards side by side. And if you played 1989, this is a little bit like that. You're matching symbols. Now, if I couldn't match the symbol, I would lose that part of the battle, and I would lose the unit, etc. And until 3 things happen. You can retreat, you have less than 2 workers or less than 2 units there. Then you can gain prestige, you can cause them to lose units as you play. Anyway, after that, you update the end of the round. So you change it to the alpha, I think is the gamma round, the beta round, epsilon round. Go to epsilon. You'll check your projects, you'll check your food. You have to pay food, you have to pay wheat per population in your cities. Your cities can grow if they have extra wheat. A megalopolis, that is a city that has More than its population will gain you prestige. Your adjustments of goods, so storing wine and wheat causes them to go bad, so you have to drop those by half. You have to pay tribute, Foros, and then you prepare for the next round by basically updating the round marker, remove all this from the tribute area. So once you do a tribute thing, you'll say, okay, I'm doing tribute here in Messenia, no one else can do it. That's essentially what that means. So that is how that works. You'll play for 3 rounds. The person with the most points at the end of the game wins the game, the big prestige at the end of the game.
So that is Polis. It is an interesting game. Like, I want to love this game, but it's so difficult at times to wrap your head around all the mechanics that at first play you go, I'll never get this, I'll never be able to play it. But once you dive into the mechanics a little bit more, you can start to see, okay, here's how because there's a major hang up. You don't start with much prestige, yet prestige is needed to do many of the actions that you need to do to get the things you need for the end of the round. So for instance, if you want to get wheat, you've got to spend prestige, but you don't have that much prestige to spend. Therefore, you've got to go out and conquer Polis to get the prestige points, but then you need to spend some prestige to move your hoplites into the areas to get that prestige, to spend that prestige, to get that prestige, to get that wheat. It's really intricate how everything's woven together, but it's very difficult to get at first. So if you're not into, I'll go ahead and say this up front, if you're not into those really crunchy mechanical engines, then this one's not for you. First of all, it's a war game with 2 players. That might exclude some people. However, if you're a fan of 1989, if you're a fan of Twilight Struggle or 1960, this one's going to fit really good into those, into that kind of niche, because even though it's not card-driven, it's resource-driven. There's something really elegant about how the systems work together and how it's historically based and what you're doing, and it's not overly war gaming. Like, you're not every time you move into an area, you don't fight. It's at the end of the round you check and see if there are fights based on 8 units in an area. That to me is nice because you speed it up, and the mechanics are more about building your city states as opposed to conquering and destroying. Yes, it is about area control. Yes, it is about conquering others' polis from your enemy, but at the end of the day, it's about building up your polis and making them better. That's plural. It's EI in Greek, so it's eis, like eisegesis, which means reading into text what you want to read into it versus reading out of it, exegesis. Anyway, that's a little Koine Greek for you. But the Greek history here is just really put on display, and you get to take part in it. So let's talk really quick about components. I've talked about mechanics first, and normally I don't do that. Normally I talk mechanics second, but let's talk components first. First of all, this game looks great. Even though, yes, it is wooden cubes, I'm aware of that, on a map, it's done well because there are inserts into the map. Like, first of all, having the resource board over to the side cut in where you can put the cubes into it, that's great. Having the little disc cut in where you can put discs in it is great. Your resource tracker is great because it's cut in. Anytime you have a 2-layered board, I'm on board for that. I love it. Yes, it's just wooden cubes. Yes, it's just screen printed proxenos and also merchants, but regardless, they look good on the board. It gives you this sense of playing a war game where you see, you're pushing those little things around like in Indiana Jones that are in an actual war, but you see this war game take place in front of you, so it really looks good. Now let's talk art design and ideas, how they go with mechanics. One of my favorite things about this is when you do tribute, the tribute action is so brilliantly done because you take the hoplites that are on that space, on that territory, and you put them over there in that territory. And because you're thematically saying, hey, these people are in this area to help out. This is what they're able to do. They're able to accomplish this. The more you have there, the more you can produce. I love that. I love that you take those actual cubes and you move them over, and how you position them tells you what resources you're going to get. I've not seen that done in a lot of games, so that to me is a brilliant idea. So I love that. I think that's really, really smart. As far as the rest of the mechanics go, it's very smooth, but again, it's very hard to grasp your mind around, okay, I need to do this to get this, to use those to get this, to use those to get this. Like, it's a very trying, difficult thing to figure out, okay, especially in the first round when you only start with 3 prestige. That's very little to start with, and you have to figure out, okay, how do I get my hoplites out there to conquer multiple polis so that I can, get what I need. So all in all, if you're into war games, this is 100% buy. I'm telling you right now, it's a 100% buy. If you're into two-player games that are very heavier, this is definitely a buy for you. If you're into lighter two-player games, or if you're playing with someone who doesn't enjoy doesn't enjoy area control or war games, this is a definite skip. You would not want to get this. But I will say it's got great art design for a war game. It's really it's smartly laid out how the mechanics play into each other, how the art plays into each other with putting those cubes out and things like that. It's a smart game. At the end of the day, it is a smart game that is difficult. The learning curve is difficult to get into, but if you're into war games, if you're into two-player area control type games, this is a definite win. If not, be sure to pass on this one because you will find it frustrating as you're trying to do what you need to do, but you can't get it done. So that is Polis. I'm Bryan Drake here on the Dice Tower. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, etc. at Dice Tower Bryan. Until next time, we'll see ya.